Hello, so today I'm going to be reviewing 1984 by George Orwell. I finished this book a few days ago. It took me quite a long time to read, but oh my goodness, it was so good. It was amazing. I didn't know what to think of it. We studied Animal Farm for our GCSE and I didn't really know whether I liked it or not, because when you study something you can never really find whether you like it, but 1984 was one of the best classics I've ever read, ever. So 1984 is a dystopian novel which is set in 1984, kind of self-explanatory, but it was published in 1949. So it was published just after the Second World War, and you can really tell in Orwell's writing that it's been influenced so much by the events of the Second World War and the totalitarianistic government of Hitler. There is a speech at a point in the book which is scarily reminiscent of Hitler, and the entire concept of the novel is so terrifying because it's this government that controls everything, but it's not a government that controls everything in a way that's inaccessible. It's as if it could actually happen, and that's what was so... I think that was the most prominent thing that I got from this book, is that it could happen. So this book follows the story of Winston Smith. He is a young, sort of 30-odd-year-old protagonist who is wasting away because the standards of living in this society are just rubbish. And he is different from everyone else. He sort of thinks in a way that some other people don't, and he questions why this society is like this, and he questions why there isn't more to his life. And it basically follows his story from the beginning, and he meets a girl called Julia. And Julia at first seems like this completely crazy, hateful person who just loves Big Brother, who is the person who watches over everything, and she's just completely dedicated to the party. But in reality, she's actually a lot like Winston, and they meet and they fall in love, and it's all about sort of, you've got their journey with like each other and sort of their rebellious nature, and it's all to do with people rebelling against the system. And they find an order and they try to rebel against the party, and it's just such a heart-wrenchingly pathetic novel. Not in a bad way, it just made me feel so sorry for the characters because they don't know what's going on around them, and the irony, because you know that everything is being controlled, and by the end they're just so helpless. I found this book really, really easy to read. Not only because the chapters, they sort of led into one another, but because it was just such an interesting thing to read. There was a section of a rebellious book, like a book written by a guy called Goldstein, who is talking about his rebellious techniques and why the party is bad, that it took me a while to get through. But the content of it, the way that it was thought through and how Orwell must have sat and thought about it, is just incredible. I'm going to read a section of it because I think it's just one of the cleverest things ever. I just think it's so clever. Even the names of the four ministries by which we are governed exhibit a sort of impudence in their deliberate reversal of the facts. The Ministry of Peace concerns itself with war, the Ministry of Truth with lies, the Ministry of Love with torture, and the Ministry of Plenty with starvation. These contradictions are not accidental, nor do they result from ordinary hypocrisy. They are deliberate exercises in doublethink, for it is only by reconciling contradictions that power can be retained indefinitely. It was a hard section to read. It took me a very long time and I had to read it out loud to myself. But the ideas within that one section, and the whole book for that matter, they just blew my mind. The way that they were so well thought through and so connected with events in history. And because it was published before the Cold War, there's quite a few references to superpowers in here. So it was the beginning of the Cold War and things were sort of the relations between countries were not great, and it was all to do with power. And I think Orwell has really, really captured this. The characterization is so good, and the way that Big Brother is never really fully described. I mean, his image, his face is described, but his everything else, he's just this 2D object, or like omnipresent, omnipotent, just terrifying figure that watches over everything, and you don't even know if he's real. So yes, this, if for anybody who likes dystopian, be it YA dystopian or classic dystopian, just, this is the perfect book to read. It's just like the core of all dystopian, and it was amazing. I loved it, and despite the fact that it took me a long time to get through, I would recommend it to anybody. It's very, very good.